new jobs, and it's under Vince Cable that this government has actually announced an increase, not a decrease, an increase in funding, so that we'll have more apprentices by the end of this Parliament than we've ever had in this country for generations. And I think that's the kind of thing that is very important to millions of people and millions of families and communities in this country, and it's exactly the kind of thing that Vince and the government as a whole should be concentrating on.
Yeah, but he broke the ministerial code on objectivity, didn't he? So how did he keep his job?
Well, as I say, I think we took very decisive and early action within hours of these comments coming to light, such that Vince Cable has absolutely no role at all, not only in that individual decision, but in the whole policy area. I don't think you can be much clearer than that.
But if a minister breaks the ministerial code on objectivity, should he keep his job?
To be honest, I think almost every single politician from every single party has probably at one time or another said something about this media group or that media group. Vince Cable said it at a time when he had statutory responsibility, sort of quasi-judicial responsibility, for a particularly important commercial transaction. So it's right to remove him from that decision and from that policy area altogether. And I think that is a clear and decisive step that was taken by the Prime Minister and myself, and I think we can now and should now move on.
But that's after the horse has bolted, isn't it? Because he said that as part of this interview, although I accept he didn't realise it was an interview at the time, he has blocked this deal, and that's why it's gone to Ofcom. How could he possibly, having blocked a deal, shown that he's not objective, having broken the ministerial code, keep his job?
What he can't do is carry on having any say or any influence, direct or indirect, over this particular deal and indeed over the whole policy area. I don't think, and I'm repeating myself, but we can go round and round in circles. What we've done very, very clearly is to say Vince Cable has no say over that at all. But I don't think, for instance, that should stop Vince Cable doing the excellent job he's doing, trying to sort out the banks, to make sure that banks lend to small businesses in this country so that we create growth and we create jobs. I don't think it should stop Vince Cable doing the excellent work he's doing, helping apprentices in places like this training centre here in Oldham. I don't think it stops Vince doing the excellent work he's doing, supporting further education colleges so that we create the skills for the economy in the future. And that's exactly what both David Cameron and I expect him to do from now on.
But the point is, he has already proven that he is not impartial. The damage has been done. He needed to be impartial in that role, and he wasn't. He has not been objective. The ministerial code says he needs to be objective. He wasn't. The end.
I think the ministerial code doesn't say we should have politicians who don't have opinions.
No, but it says they should be objective, and he wasn't.
Well, no, and he wasn't on that issue, and that's why he's been removed from that issue. It's in fact why the whole policy area has been moved from his department to another department, and that was a decision that David Cameron and I took very, very quickly, because we saw, as you quite rightly suggested, that in that area he's proved himself to be too subjective, and not because of the comments. It wouldn't be appropriate for him to carry on in that function. But to somehow suggest that therefore, given, for instance, Vince Cable's strong views that the last government shouldn't have allowed the banks to lend irresponsibly in the way that they did, incurring a massive tax, a massive liability on taxpayers in this country in the bank bailout, that somehow he shouldn't have a role in trying to put the banks on a more stable and sensible footing so that they can lend to small businesses. I don't agree with that. I think there are many, many other areas of his responsibilities as Secretary of State for Business where people would reasonably expect that he should continue to do the very good job he's doing.
So what does the minister in your government have to do to be sacked then, given that they have to be objective in a role such as this, and they have proven beyond any reasonable doubt that they're not? What would he have to do in order to be sacked?
We really are going around in circles. As I've said, he has proven himself on this particular point, on this particular deal, in this particular policy area, that it would have been inappropriate for him to continue. That is why he's been stripped of those responsibilities. That's why that whole policy area of media and telecoms and so on regulation has been moved to another department. So to that extent, you are completely right. To say that for that reason, he can play no role in how we provide young people with a future in vocational education, in higher education, how we can support apprenticeships, how we can sort out the banks, how we can create growth after this terrible recession that we've inherited from Labour. I don't think one follows from the other.
Okay, so you feel that we're going round in circles, so let's cut to the chase then. The reason that he's kept his job is because the coalition is wobbly. You need him as much as he needs you.
No, as I say, we've taken action to make sure that because of what he's reported, what he did say, and what he himself acknowledged he said, that he is therefore removed and his powers are removed in that area of dealing with that particular deal and that particular policy area.
Yeah.
I don't think that disqualifies him, and neither David Cameron nor I think that disqualifies him from continuing to work as an excellent Secretary of State for Business, trying to pick up the pieces of the economic rubble that we've inherited from the Labour Party, and that's exactly what he, and indeed the government as a whole, will now get on and do.
Even though that means that 70 workers, or however many it was within his department, have had to box up all of their belongings, all of their desks have had to go to a different department in Whitehall so that Vince Cable can keep his job, so that he can keep the coalition in place.
You're not seriously saying that because officials have to move from one office to another in Whitehall, therefore it is not justifiable that Vince Cable, given his otherwise outstanding record in making the right judgments on our economy, the right judgments on our banks, making the right policy decisions on how we can provide a future for our young people through increased apprenticeships, through support to vocational education, through to reform in the way in which our universities are funded. I really don't think anyone would seriously think that because we're going to have to ask some people to move from one office to another in Whitehall, that he should stop pursuing those very important policy objectives. I think most people out there in the country expect us in government to sort out the mess that we inherited from Labour, and that is what Vince Cable and every member of this government is going to do.
I'm not saying it, Vince Cable's saying it. He says that he's the nuclear option. You couldn't do it without him.
As I say, I've given you an explanation of why his powers have been removed from him in that particular policy area. I think there is a very strong case, which both myself and the Prime Minister feel, to allow Vince Cable, as we have, been giving him full support, to do the other very important functions that he needs to continue with as Secretary of State for Business.
So you think he's wrong as well when he says that he has the nuclear option? That he was wrong when he said that as well?
He said he was wrong, he apologised for it, he's apologised to the Cabinet, he was very embarrassed, he's right to be embarrassed, and he shouldn't have said those things.
Is he now safe, or is his coat on the shaky nail?
Sorry, I can't hear you. Can you say that again?
I said, is he now safe, or is his coat still on the shaky nail?
I'm sorry, I can genuinely not hear you, is it?
OK, don't worry, I'll ask you a different question. Why do you think the Telegraph kept the story back?
You'll have to ask the editor of the Daily Telegraph.
Oh, you heard that one. Excellent. Let me go back to my other question, then now you can hear me again. Is he now safe, or is his coat on the shaky nail?
As I say, the decision we've taken is to remove some responsibilities from Vince Cable and from his department, but to keep him in the position, which is a very important position in government, which is absolutely fundamental to the wider objective that we all share in government, to rebalance the British economy after the disastrous decisions taken by the Labour government, in which they left no money, they said themselves, the cupboard is bare, in which they allowed the bankers to lend money in an irresponsible way in which they shouldn't have done, in which they then called upon millions of taxpayers to fund the bank bailout. And we are having to pick up all of those pieces. And that is a very difficult job, and I think it is right that Vince Cable should play and continue to play a prominent role in rebuilding the British economy on a more sustainable footing.
A final thought, Mr Clegg, if you would please. So just to underline, the Business Secretary is 100% secure in his position, and he has your full support and that of the Prime Minister.
Now that Vince Cable has been stripped of his responsibilities for this particular deal and for that particular policy area, which has been moved elsewhere in Whitehall, he enjoys our full backing to get on with a job that he must do on behalf of the country as a whole, and that is to try and rebuild the British economy after the disastrous decisions which we inherited and the disastrous economic situation which we inherited from the Labour Party.
Deputy Prime Minister, thank you very much indeed for joining us here on Sky News. Thank you.